Welcome everybody. So I'm going to take just a couple of minutes to check the camera, make sure the exposure looks good, get everything set up, and then we will get started. So this painting came into the studio after some pretty heavy and pretty poor restoration, historical restoration. The painting was torn and most of the painting was overpainted all over the face, all over the background. It was in pretty rough condition, and so we were tasked with not only removing the old work, but figuring out how to put the painting back together, as we are wont to do. And so after a lot of structural work, removing the old lining, removing the old overpainting, stabilizing the paint layer, doing a new lining on this painting, and then doing a lot of retouching on the background, we are now at the last part of the conservation, the last part of the retouching, the face, which, as you know, I like to leave for last because it's the most exciting part of retouching, for me at least, and it's a big carrot or cherry on top of a long project. So let's jump right in. As you can see, there is a pretty gnarly tear right down the center of her face. And this tear extends from her eyebrow almost all the way to the bottom of the canvas, which of course you can't see. It took a lot of work to get this to this state, removing all of the overpaint, which covered up most of her face, and stabilizing it and getting the tear filled in and ready. And so now we're ready to start retouching. So what I will do is start retouching, and I have my assistant here, and she's going to be pulling out some questions from the chat that are interesting and give me an opportunity to ramble on. And let's see if we can't put this painting back together. So the first thing that I do whenever I start a project like this, where there's a lot of retouching, is to mix kind of a base color. And this isn't supposed to be the final color. This is just supposed to be something that gets me kind of close to where I want to be. Something that is neither too dark or too light, but just kind of Goldilocks color that I can shift. I can make it darker, I can make it lighter, I can make it cooler or warmer. It's nice to have a starting point that then I can pivot from. And so that's what I'm doing right now. Unfortunately, you guys cannot see that because I don't have multiple cameras set up. But trust me, I am just mixing a color on the palette. Let me see if I can bring the palette up and show you. So I'm just kind of, I'm going to slide off the palette. Just mixing a color that I think is going to get me in the ballpark. And then I will change that color as need be. And the first pass of retouching is mostly just to get rid of that's a little too bright. It's mostly just to get rid of the filling material because the white is kind of shocking and stark. And when I look at it, it throws my perception of color off. It's too bright. So just by getting rid of it in these just like 5 seconds that I've just put color on, already the painting is starting to, at least from my perspective, thinking about color matching, look better. The harshness of the white is gone, and it's a color that kind of feels within the ballpark, and it's someplace that I can start and work from. So I'm not looking to get anything super accurate here, just trying to block in some colors.
You ready for your first question?
I am ready for my first question, I think. I hope. We'll see.
Charles Frost just joined. Who's the portrait of and who is the artist?
So the artist is F.E. or C.E. It's from 1872. I don't know who the portrait is, nor do I know who the artist is, but I do know that the client, the owner of the painting, who I believe is watching, and maybe they can chime in the chat, this is a portrait of their great-great-great-grandmother or something like that, a family member from very, very long ago. It's a painting that's been in the family for a very long time, kind of a prized heirloom, and they brought it to me for conservation. Oftentimes paintings come in and they're really great paintings, and we have no idea who the artist is. And that's largely because while the artist signed it with a monogram down here, I don't know who CEF is. And, unlike now where we have the internet and we have information available at our fingertips, In the past, we didn't have that stuff. So a lot of these artists just kind of disappear into the ether.
Basil Worm from East Bay, California wants to know, do you have any tips for mixing skin tones?
Well, so skin tones is a really broad range because, of course, we have a lot of different skin tones in the world. And some of them are, I don't want to say easier to mix because it's just color, right? You're just mixing colors. But by virtue of mixing a lot of Caucasian and lighter skin tones, those are generally easier. And this isn't because people don't paint people with darker skin tones. It's just that historically they didn't. And so the majority of portraits we have are from Europe or from early America, and they're of whiter people, lighter people. And so we as conservators get a lot of practice on lighter skin tones and not as much practice on darker skin tones. But the answer for the question, because I think I just rambled on and didn't answer it, is like I said, you start with kind of a base neutral and then you pivot and you make it darker and lighter accordingly. Two colors that I generally try to avoid when I'm working with skin tones are white and black, because white just washes out the color and black makes it muddy. So if I want to make a skin tone darker, I'm going to add a brown or a green or a blue to make it cooler. If I want to make it lighter, I will probably add something warmer, maybe a little bit of white. But generally, you want to stay away from black because it just muddies everything up, and stay away from white because it just kind of washes everything out.
Win Palos wants to know if we'll see a video later of the complete restoration.
Oh, of this one? No, unfortunately, we didn't do a video of this one. I didn't even conceive of doing the live stream until we were almost finished. And then on a lark, kind of said, hey, why not do a live stream? It's been, I don't know, 5 years since I last embarked on a live stream. So it feels like a good time to do one. But that's a good idea. Next time I have a painting that is a good candidate for a live stream, I'll consider making a full-length video of it, and then maybe, I don't know, timing it all together so that if you want to see the final restoration, you have to watch the live stream. That's maniacal enough for you guys, right?
Hello, I am Kat. Is thinking about becoming an art conservator. What do you recommend doing for studying, practicing outside of school?
Well, I think the most, so I will hedge my response by saying that I have a unique path into conservation. And now the paths into conservation are very rote and very well defined. I think from my perspective as a bench conservator, and when I say bench conservator, I mean somebody who practices conservation all day, as opposed to somebody who's in research or writing or in, kind of an academic setting, is your bench skills. So while I think that art history is really cool and really helpful and is very informative, it's not going to make you a better retoucher. And while I think that chemistry is critically important to have a good base of, you'll never be as smart as the smartest chemists. So more importantly than having a chemistry degree is having a bunch of chemists at your disposal to answer your questions. So I think the most important thing would be to get familiar with materials, get familiar with using materials, learning how to manipulate them so that they do what you want, learning how to react and pivot when things don't go the way you want, because realistically, maybe that's a lesson for life. And just getting familiar with using your hands, being around materials, and adding those arrows to your quiver. I can teach you, you can learn art history, you can learn chemistry, but there's a certain quality that goes into making art and handling materials that I don't want to say you can't learn, but if you come to conservation already confident in your handling of paint, in your color mixing skills, in your ability to work with canvas or wood and things like that, you're already like hitting the ground running, and I think that will serve you really well.
I want to scroll up to a question from Vance Kapoor. Would you have pursued this career without your father's legacy?
You mean would I have been indentured into servitude without my father? I mean, it's a really interesting question. So for those of you who are new here or who need a refresher, I was always interested in art making. Both of my parents were artists. My grandfather was an architect. Yeah, he was an architect until he passed away. I guess he's still an architect, but he's dead. My uncle is a jeweler. He's a goldsmith. My aunt is a writer. And then the black sheep of the family is a very successful doctor. You know, so it goes. So art was always something that I was interested in, but I wanted to pursue art making. You know, I wanted to be a world famous, history changing artist, like every artist. So I studied studio arts, and I found the process of making art to be incredibly rewarding. I found everything else about art making to be incredibly frustrating. So as I became more confident in making art, I became less enthralled with the world of art making, if that makes any sense. I had my father and his business as a resource throughout my life. I worked summers when I was a kid. When I was sick, I'd go to his studio and hang out. So I always saw it, and I guess through osmosis, it was always there. So when I started working with him when I was in college, it felt like a natural extension of what I really loved about art making, solving problems, working with materials, and seeing something come out of nothing. So I think all conservators have a certain amount of artists in them, and whether they choose to pursue art making and then, kind of drop out of it, or they never pursue art making, I think the best conservators understand that space, understand what it takes to make art. So do I think that I would have gone into art conservation were it not for my father? I don't know that I would have gone into art conservation. I might have gone into, I don't know, being a general contractor or furniture design or, a rogue architect or something. I always wanted to make stuff and work with my hands and not have to wear a suit and punch in at a regular time and have all that kind of stuff. And so being in a creative field, a creative endeavor always felt right to me.
Elena de Howler, Werewolf Queen.
There you go.
It says there's a type of acrylic paint called crackle medium. Would that help you with your work?
So I know crackle medium. The problem with using materials that are not specifically for conservation, and by specifically for conservation, I mean made by companies that are conservation focused, is that we just don't know what's in them. So crackle medium is a cool paint that you apply, and then I think you apply something else on top of it. And anyway, it gives you a really crackled effect. It makes the paint look really old. It's really cool. The problem is that the companies, and I've reached out to these companies and asked them, hey, can you give me the breakdown of the materials? I'm interested in using this for conservation. And they say, we can't do that, it's proprietary. And I tell them I'm not interested in copying. I just want to know if this is a safe medium for use in art conservation. And that's usually where the conversation ends. So unfortunately, those materials aren't suitable, not because they're not cool or because they're not good, but because I don't know what's in them. And I have a responsibility to make sure that all the work that I do is in accord with modern conservation practice. And that means archival, reversible, minimally invasive, and stable. And so if I can't verify what's in a material, I can't use it, even though it would make my life exponentially easier.
C321-D9Q wants to know.
Is that what your parents named you?
How do you know when to discard a restoration method and replace it with a newer method?
When it stops working for me. I mean, conservation is always changing, and so there's always new materials, new approaches, new methods, and it's very tempting to jump on the latest trend, or I say trend like things are changing rapidly. They're not. But it's very tempting to jump on the latest thing or use the latest material that you see or tool. But ultimately, it's got to work for the conservator in their practice. And the minute that a technique or material stops working for you in your practice, then you have to audit why you're still using it. And I do this often in my studio. particularly when I have interns come in or assistants come in, they'll often ask me questions like, well, why are we using this? And I'll start by saying, well, it's because it's what we use. And they'll say, yeah, but I don't understand why. And then I have to step back and do an audit and say, well, why are we still using this? Is it just because we've always used this? Or is it because it's the best material for this technique, or, you know, the best material for this project? And there have been times where that self-audit has resulted in a change of material or a change of technique. And, you know, the studio's been better for it. So as long as it works, it works. And the minute it stops working, it ain't working.
Anna Ramirez would like to know if you've ever come across a modern acrylic painting and what's the approach to work with more contemporary materials?
So yeah, I've been working with acrylic paintings ever since I started doing conservation, probably in the late 90s. Acrylics are a little different than oil paints in that they're plastic, number one, so they operate a little bit differently than oil paints do. And any acrylic painter or any painter who's gone between acrylic and oil knows that there's both pros and cons to each. Acrylic isn't necessarily any different than oil in the approaches you take. Some of the materials you have to use are different, right? So because acrylic is a plastic, we can't use some of the solvents because they will melt acrylic. So let's say a solvent like xylene or acetone. Well, you can't take that to an acrylic painting because you won't have any painting left. Whereas on an oil painting, it might be safe to use those materials. That said, there are all sorts of other materials that we can use on acrylic paintings. So it's not fundamentally different. It's just kind of tangentially different.
A couple people have asked if we're ever going to see your art.
My art. This is my art. I haven't made any artwork in many, many years, and that's a symptom of having a young family, of running a business, of renovating houses, of finding other projects that are interesting, and also generally not feeling all that interested in going home and picking up materials after spending a day working with them. You know, the idea of going home and getting messy and creating is kind of exhausting. That said, I do have a sketchbook, and I know that at some point when my retouching, my conservation phase ends, I would like to make some art again. Maybe I'll put something up on Instagram at some point and open myself up to the torrent of lightning that is the internet and judgment. We'll see.
Mike on deck would like to know if you would ever do paper or watercolor conservation.
So I don't work with paper because it is a completely different field of restoration. Much like you wouldn't ask your podiatrist to do brain surgery, or you wouldn't ask a neurologist to do orthopedic surgery. They may be qualified to do it in an emergency, but you really want to go to a specialist. And so because I'm not a paper conservator, I don't enter that space. Now, I know how to work on paper a little bit from working with paper conservators and my general conservation knowledge, but I generally leave that to the experts. And it's multifold. One, that's their business, and I like to respect that. If I start taking their business, it makes it harder for them to eke out a living, and it's also jeopardizes the referrals that they give me. So I work with many paper conservators who don't do paintings, and we have a respect for each other's expertise. We collaborate where necessary, and we step back where necessary. But also, it would require a lot of different materials, a lot of different equipment, and unless I was going to do that wholesale, it's not necessarily worth it for me to embark upon that level of investment. You know, to build out a wet studio and change how I work just to do a little bit of paper conservation. Plus, I don't like paper conservation. I like paintings. They're robust. They're durable. You can do a lot to them. And it's really fun. I find paper conservation to be very nerve-wracking and very tedious. And I talk to the paper conservators with whom I work, and they say, oh my God, if watching you work, it's like, holy cow, it gives us anxiety, you know. So to each their own.
Speaking of other conservators, Frank Kramer asks, have you ever met a conservator that you fixed their work, and what was their reaction?
I don't think that let me think about this. Yes and no. Most of the conservation work that I undo or reverse is historic, and so the conservator is long gone, which is why I don't feel so bad about maybe being harsh with my comments, because they're dead. I have in the past had paintings come in from conservators who have tried to work on the piece and found themselves in over their head. Something didn't go right, whatever the case may be. And I have a lot of respect for those people, because it takes a lot of humility to say, I'm in over my head. I don't know what I'm doing. I need help, which I think should be praised, right? Not only does that offer them an opportunity to not mess it up worse, but it offers them the opportunity to learn and to get better. So when that happens, I try to be graceful and respectful of what might be a hard moment for them, and try to explain to them what happened and why, if they're open to it. Not everybody is. And those are the best type of interactions, where you can tell somebody, oh, well, this is why I would have done it. This is what happened. Here's the mistake that was made, and here's how you can recover from it. And next time, now you know. And usually that ends up being a nice relationship that will converse over time, and it feels healthy and productive. I have had situations where clients have brought me artwork that has been done by somebody else, and they've been unsatisfied with it. And I've had to reach out because I need to know what was done. I have a question about a material or a technique or something like that. And instead of reinventing the wheel, if the person is alive, I'll just give them a call, and I'll say, hey, I'm Julian over here. I received this painting. I usually don't tell them that the client was unhappy. I usually say, oh, it got damaged again, and we're doing a new conservation on it. Would you mind sharing your conservation report? And that's where things get interesting. Sometimes the answer is, yeah, no problem. Here's the report, and I get it, and it tells me everything I need to know. And the conservator says, oh yeah, and here, blah, 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 blah. Here's how I would undo it. And we work collaboratively. And again, it's wonderful. And I say, thank you. I really appreciate it. I don't tell them that the client was unhappy, because there's no point in being mean. And then we fix the painting. There are other times when they say, well, what do you mean a report? And I say, well, your report. They say, well, we don't have one. I say, okay, can you tell me what you did? And they say, well, they're usually evasive with their answer. They don't want to share. And that's when I kind of get the hint that, like, oh, okay, this may not have been great above board work. And I'll try to get anything I can out of that situation, but usually I just have to reinvent the wheel. I have had situations where people have been nasty and really hostile. And, part of me wants to pick a fight with them, but then I remember that I'm an adult and there's no point, and I can just move on with my life.
A couple of people have asked if there's ever been a work that you received that just can't be restored.
Yes, 100%. Usually it's can't be restored, or cannot in the context of its moment be restored. Can't be restored. Yeah, I've had paintings come in that were actually on fire. Like they caught fire and the heat charred the paint, and they're burned, and there's just no salvaging them. The actual paint has been irrevocably changed. And that, kind of is what it is. And usually clients recognize that, and they're bringing it to me and they're saying, this is kind of a last ditch, anything you can do. And, it's unfortunate, but fire is pretty brutal. There's not much you can do when a painting is actually on fire. But more often than not, it's a situation where a painting is really, really damaged, and the client paid nothing for it. Maybe they paid $100 or $50, and they want to conserve it. And I tell them it's much like buying a house. If you buy a very, very cheap house, expect to put a lot of money into repairing it. And I tell them the cost of conservation, and they say, well, we only paid $100 for it, and it's only worth $500. And your quote is 10 times that. And I say, well, that's that is what it is, right? I mean, you're asking me to do a mountain of work on a painting, and it doesn't really matter what the painting is worth or what you paid for it. The work is the work.
Scott Dutcher wants to know, how long can you retouch before your eyes break?
That's actually a really timely question, because last week I sat down to do some retouching on a painting that will be a video later on. I'm not quite finished with it. And I thought I was going to do, I got into the studio in the morning and I thought I would do a couple hours before lunch, and I sat for 8.5 hours retouching. And it was one of those moments where I was kind of in flow state, or like an out of body experience, where I didn't even realize it had been that long. And I got up to, I think, get some water or use the bathroom, and it was like 5:30. And I was like, oh, I got to go home. It's time to leave. So that's a rare occasion. Usually I can do 2-3 hours before I start not wanting to do it anymore. And then I got to take a break, or I got to go find something else to do. I have a pretty high tolerance for retouching, but I don't want to get to the point where I'm being sloppy or I'm resenting the work, because then things go downhill. So it's a matter of recognizing when is a good moment to take a break. Like, okay, I was on a high for a while, but now I'm starting to feel a little antsy. Maybe now is a good time to step away.
Star CSC is curious, and I am as well, if you would ever sell the pink statue in your storeroom.
You want the pink baby, the infamous pink baby? I think a lot of people want the pink baby. So first off, it needs conservation. It is not in a state where it can go out to the world. It's still damaged. And I would have to do a lot of due diligence to make sure that the client is gone and I can't find them before I would liquidate it. But yeah, I mean, if enough people want it, you start what's the petition.org, right? Isn't that it? Start a petition.org for me to sell the pink baby. And if enough people want it, I'll sell it for charity.
Love that.
Great. Now I've made it. Now I've just opened the doors. Oh boy.
Ian Kennedy wants to know if you'll do another season of Behind the Canvas.
Yes, I actually will do another season. I have been filming and working on another season of Behind the Canvas. I'm sorry that it didn't come faster, and it's going to be a little while yet before it comes out. It's just incredibly difficult to produce a show like that by yourself, because that's pretty much what I do. But yeah, we have 7 locations I think we're going to do, and they're really, really cool, and I'm really, really excited, and that's all I'm going to tell you. So you'll just have to stay tuned. I think we will probably be airing them in January, 2 a week like we did last time, but we'll see.
Do you ever find yourself asking, I wonder what the artist would say about my restoration?
No. I don't care what the artist would say about my restoration. I mean, I have worked with artists who are alive who have had to approve the conservation. Okay, I'll tell you a great story. The artist Carl Worsham, he is a Chicago artist. He was part of the Harry Who, which is a Chicago movement that included Ed Paschke, kind of tangentially Roger Brown and Susan Rothenberg and Miyoko Ito. Anyways, whatever. You guys can go look it up if you are curious. Carl Worsham, very cool dude. I knew his son from school and from professional. He's in the art world. And I did a lot of restoration of his works, my father too before him, just by being in Chicago. And at one point there was a piece of his that had a X-ray film as part of it. There were he had created this figure with glasses, and the glasses was exposed X-ray film. And the X-ray film had deteriorated, broken into pieces, and one of the lenses was lost. So the owner was a gallery who wanted to sell it and was hemming and hawing, didn't know what to do because it was a gallery, and galleries are my favorite and least favorite people to work with. I love their passion. Sometimes I hate their passion. So there was a big question about whether do we replace it? What do we replace it with? Do we leave it? Blah, 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 blah. And as a technician, I'm here to just solve a problem. So I gave multiple options, and then the gallery got in touch with Carl and said, Carl, go to Baumgartner's studio. I want you to meet with him and discuss this. And so Carl came over, and I had met him many times before, so I knew him, but it's always, you're always kind of in the presence of royalty when an artist comes in, particularly one who you kind of studied when you were in art school and who you respect. And so I was a little nervous. And I think at this point, my father had passed away already. So I was flying solo. And we all met there and we talked about the piece. We talked about the issues that it was facing. And then I gave them a couple of different options. One, we could simulate an X-ray film that would be archival and wouldn't deteriorate in the future out of Mylar. Two, I could source some vintage X-ray film, some exposed X-ray film, and we could use that. Or three, we could just kind of leave it as is and say, well, it's lost. It's part of the piece's life cycle. And the gallery owner was very deep into the philosophical questions about all of this, asking me and all this kind of stuff. And it came time for Carl and his wife to, because she worked with him. His wife was Lori Gunn. She still is Lori Gunn. Carl passed away a couple of years ago. And Carl kind of just shrugged his shoulders and said, I don't know, whatever Julian wants to do. And the gallery owner was like, wait a minute, you made this painting. This is your artwork, your expression of mastery and blah, 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 blah. And, Carl kind of shrugged his shoulders and said, I made this when I was like 22. I don't even remember what it looked like. I don't even remember why I made it. I don't know. He's the expert. And, the gallery said, really? You're going to trust him to make the decisions? And Carl said, I've trusted him countless times before. Why wouldn't I trust him now? And so we ended up sourcing some vintage X-ray film and modifying it and cutting it and coating it with some UV protective varnish so that hopefully that slowed its deterioration. I made a couple of extras and we used that, adhered it to the canvas with a reversible adhesive. So if ever it needed to come off, it could. And we documented it and went on its way. And I asked Carl, a year or so later, next time I saw him, I said, Carl, what was that about? Were you just running interference so the gallery owner wouldn't give me a hard time because the gallery owner was kind of a tough cookie? And he said, no, I love the gallery owner, but I trust you. And I said, yeah. But he said, stop, listen to me. I trust you. This is your job. This is your expertise. You are the professional here. I trust you. And coming from somebody who I respected and whose work I had studied, that was, it was a huge compliment, and one that really at that time, because my father had only passed away, I think maybe a couple of months before this, it really put wind in my sails. It really made me kind of feel confident that people did trust me, and important people, and that they valued my opinion, and that I had a place here, that I wasn't an imposter, because, I suffer, like many of us do, from a heavy dose of imposter syndrome. And so the experience with Carl was probably the greatest one I could have had at the most important time in my then kind of young career. So, it can be incredibly rewarding and kind of one of those moments that I'll never forget. And when he passed away, I communicated this story to his son, and we had a really fond, really tender recollection of Carl. And so long-winded story, but sometimes you get situations where you're unexpectedly are rewarded. And in this case, Carl did that for me. I've worked with plenty of artists who have been sticks in the mud and pains in the butt, but that's also my job. And, such is life.
I'm going to reword this question a little bit, but can you be a conservator and do everything except for retouching? Like, can you skip the retouching and be a conservator?
Well, I suppose if you work in a larger firm, like maybe there's 20 people or 30 people, and your expertise is not retouching, I suppose if there are people who are happy to do the retouching, then yeah, I guess if you just were an expert in cleaning paintings and doing the other stuff, my studio is mostly me, and then sometimes I have assistants or interns. So nobody can skip anything. Frankly, I also think that you deprive yourself of mastery if you skip something, right? Play to your strengths, train your weaknesses. So if you're not great at retouching, practice, because you'll get better if you practice, and you'll be a better conservator. So yes, technically I think you can, but why would you want to have a weakness in your repertoire?
Couple questions on your most valuable or important piece that you worked on.
Haven't you all watched the video on my YouTube, the one that's been there forever, on the splash page? The value is almost completely irrelevant to me. I don't even see these pieces as having value. I don't see the artist's name anymore. I sometimes don't even see the image. I just see I see the matrix. I see a series of problems that need to be solved, and that's what excites me. But I will answer your question. Probably, I'm forgetting the artist's name. It was a painting that was stolen, and then it was sold at Christie's, and a very famous collector from a galaxy long, long ago, far away, purchased it. And I think it's a $48 million painting. That might be the most expensive. I've worked on a Roy Lichtenstein that was 14. I've worked on a whole bunch of old Italian masters that were $5-7 million. A bunch of Georgia O'Keeffe's that were in the tens of millions of dollars. It's more exciting for everybody else than it is for me. Most of those paintings are in really great condition, and so they don't need a lot of work, so they're boring. They come in because they have a tiny little chip, or they need a light surface cleaning, and it's like minimal amount of work, and there's a lot of paperwork involved, and it's not all that interesting. I mean, it's good for telling at family events and dinner parties and stuff like that, but money doesn't make it interesting.
All those dinner parties you mentioned.
All those dinner parties I go to.
Green Buzz wants to know if you can remember the first painting you ever restored. And let's narrow it down. The first one you started start to finish? Just you.
Okay. I will tell y'all a story because you're here putting up with my ramblings. Captive audience. You can go somewhere. I don't remember the first painting that I conserved solely by myself. I don't know if I would be able to, because for many years, my father would work with me on paintings. But when I was working with him, when I first started with him, there was a painting that he said, "You're going to run this from start to finish." I had been working with him for a couple of years, and I felt comfortable, confident. Some of the hubris of being a young person had dissipated some. And he said, "I want you to write the proposal. I want you to examine it, make the tests. I want you to then do the work and, write the report and do all that kind of stuff. This is your project. I'll just kind of be here watching." So it's for a client, dropped it off while you were out one day, something like that. And so I proceeded to do everything that I had done. And then, I'll make a long story short. I melted the painting. You're laughing. It's not funny. I comprehensively destroyed it. I removed all of the paint, not all of it, but I killed it. I mean, I walked it out behind the shed and I put it down. And I was, boy, was I mortified. Long and short, it was my father's painting. He had bought it at a junk shop, and he had me doing it without training wheels to prove that I wasn't ready, to humble me, to let me know that no matter how confident I felt, no matter how many paintings I had worked on, no matter how many reports, no matter how many this, that, and the other thing, that I always had to presume that I was one mistake away from catastrophe. And that humility, that consciousness of fallibility would serve me well. And he didn't tell me that it was his painting until I had destroyed it, tried to cover up and fix the mess, and not cover up, but like tried to recover from my mistake. And then it was time to kind of circle back with the client. And he wanted me to feel what that felt like. He wanted me to understand what making a really big mistake felt like. But he didn't want me to actually make a mistake and jeopardize mine or his business at the time. And I tell you, you want to talk about a trauma? That shook me to my core. And it's a trauma that once I recovered from the initial, like, how could you, I went home and threw up, like I was panicking. I was, I realized the value of it. And I mean, I've told my therapist this, and we've had long discussions about the value, the quote unquote value of it. I think her perspective is, maybe your father giving you trauma is not a great thing, which I generally agree with. But in the context of operating this business, it saved me because I always have that in the back of my mind. Go slow, be careful. Don't make the mistake because you don't have training wheels now. There's no net.
Matt L wants to know if whenever you're out and about, do you see paintings that you wish you could retouch?
Oh my God. It's like, I am insufferable when I go to museums because all I can see are the problems. I have to consciously turn off the conservator in me because nobody who I go with wants to hear, oh, look, you can see that retouching here. Oh my God, I can't believe that the seam is still visible. Oh, look at that. Look at how the varnish is blotchy. What? They just did that? Nobody wants to see that or hear that. But that's what's going through my head kind of nonstop. So I have to be conscious about not letting that destroy what should be a really enjoyable experience. Not just for me, but for the other people I'm with, because otherwise I'll end up being solo.
Do you plan on doing more live streams?
Maybe. This one has been less traumatic than the last one. So if it stays that way, why not? I think it's fun, at least so far. It's hard schedule-wise, but I think if you folks like it, then I think we can look into maybe doing some more of them.
Do you ever say no to a client?
Yeah, all the time. I joke here that my favorite thing to do is to fire clients. And I joke about that because I don't ever want to fire a client. But there are some clients who are, let me back up and say, almost every client wants the best for their work, loves their work, and really is passionate and cares. The problem comes that many of them are not informed about what is possible, what is realistic, or what things cost. And so there are often a lot of hard discussions I have to have with clients about those elements. No, I can't just cut the bottom 6 inches off because it's cheaper than having me retouch it. No, it's not possible to remove fire damage, actual fire from this painting. What you're asking will take 6 months and you're expecting it to be done in 3 weeks. Or this is the number one. Here is the price. No, I'm sorry, I can't do it for half. So that's when I say no to clients. The rubric is, do I feel that this is going to be a healthy and productive relationship that's going to benefit everybody involved? And if that answer is no, then I respectfully offer that they should probably find another conservator. But let me add to that, that's pretty rare. Most people who come to me trust me. They come to me because of my experience and my expertise, and they say, let's do this. And if there are questions about cost or timeline, there are oftentimes creative solutions, right? Maybe it takes longer, and that means it costs less because I don't have to prioritize it, something like that. I will always try to work with a client to find a solution, problem solving.
Okay, so technically this wasn't a question, but I know
We're going rogue.
people want to know, would you ever consider doing an art museum tour?
An art museum tour? What, like me going with people?
Yeah, like you leading a tour at an art museum.
Why? It would ruin the experience for you folks. So I'm not an art historian. So my art history experience is limited to what I learned in college and what I've taught myself along the way. I love art history, but it's not the most important thing for me. So I'm not Jerry Saltz. Hi, Jerry, if you're watching. He's not watching. I'm not Jerry Saltz, so I'm not going to give you an art history or a critic's perspective on it. I would be approaching it more from a technical side, looking at how it was made, why the artist made those decisions, the limitations, talking about the life of an object, things like that, which maybe, I don't know, maybe that's interesting. Great, now I'm talking myself into doing another thing. Maybe. I will put it into the back burner and think on it, and maybe petition.org, right? Isn't that the site? Petition.org, whatever it is. If enough people want it, I would be open to it, but you would have to sign a waiver acknowledging that your experience of art would be forever diminished because of your time with me, and that I'm not liable for ruining art for you.
Right. SP wants to know, do you ever get paintings from other countries? And if so, can you tell that they haven't been in an American home, or whatever that means?
So I get paintings from all over the world, yes. Not only are paintings in America from all over the world, right? America is a relatively young country, and so a lot of the paintings that are in private collections, even in museums, were born in Europe. But I also get artwork from all over the world. People ship it to me. I can't really tell that it's from another home. The paintings get dirty, they get grimy in Paris in the same way they get grimy in Texas, and the same way they get grimy in Chicago. I can tell by the materials that it's from another country, but not necessarily by the damage or the age.
Bubba wants to know, what other skills do you like to watch or want to learn?
I'm an equal opportunity thief, and I say that proudly. I watch a lot of, my favorite TV show is This Old House. I'm sure I've mentioned that before. And I have stolen many techniques, approaches, and kind of things from the brilliant craftspeople on that show. If I see something that I think will work in the studio and help me conserve a painting, I will steal it. I've often said that from This Old House, I watched Tommy Silva use a piece of wetted felt to smooth out a plaster repair that he did on a ceiling. And my brain kind of exploded, and I said, wait a minute, why can't I do that on paintings? And so I stole it, and I use it now. I use wet felt. I'm sure you've seen that in some of the videos when I have to remove or smooth some fill-in. And that's not anything that I learned in a conservation book or from my father or by watching conservators. I learned that from Tommy Silva in This Old House. I watch a lot of car restoration. I watch a lot of, I like watching people who do things because I think it helps me be better at doing what I do.
Well, how do you see the skills you've developed in the studio, like patience and time management, play out in your day-to-day life?
Oh boy. you all think that I'm patient and disciplined and I've got the whole world fooled. I try to carry those through my daily life. Try. I'm not always perfect at it. Sometimes it's really hard. I think it's really easy in the studio because while I am emotionally invested in a positive outcome for these pieces, they're not mine. And so I'm not emotionally caught up in them, if that makes any sense. I want success for everything, but there's a distance. I get to choose to be emotionally invested in these works. In my real life, I'm emotionally invested in everything, whether I like it or not. Whether it's, dealing with my kids or my partner or my family. You don't get the choice to say, well, no, I'm going to check out on this one. And so it makes activating that patience and that discipline and that compassion hard. So I think that while I may be predisposed to being more patient, disciplined, and whatever in the studio, transferring those skills outside of the studio, you're just a normal person with all the normal hangups and baggage and stuff like that.
Would you consider doing a video one day in a restoration studio?
Yes, I have in fact tried to do that video multiple times with my small production team. We've run into hiccups because it's scheduling, getting everybody on the same page, finding projects that are interesting, and stuff like that. But yes, that is something that I have been and am continuing to try to put together to give you folks, the larger audience, a more acute sense of what it's actually like here, as opposed to just watching kind of the videos that I put out. I think they're kind of like features, right? They're singular painting, they're a methodical approach. All of the crying and screaming is edited out, because nobody wants to see that. Maybe you do, I don't know. So if there was a more acute look into the daily workings or like what a 1 week in the studio looks like, I think that could be really fun. It's just a matter of figuring out how to do that and tell that story in a way that is compelling. But we're working on it. We have it. It's something I think about.
Ooh, Max says that every artist gets critiques. Who critiques your work?
I'm not an artist. I'm an artisan or craftsperson. I don't have the burden of narrative or meaning, so I am absolved of that. But who critiques my work? Every human on the internet. Every anonymous human on the internet. Bonus points if they've completed half of a semester of conservation school. And are from a foreign country. Everybody is a critic. Everybody wants to say what I have done wrong, how I could have done it better. The whole you shoulds. You should have this, you should have that, you should have this, you should have that. And some of that, most of it is uninformed, inappropriate, unhelpful, unnecessary. Occasionally people will say, well, I'm curious why you did X, Y, or Z when A, B, or C would have also worked. Those are questions that I love because it allows me to explain what I did and to engage in a dialogue that could also be helpful and instructive to me. But anonymous critiques are things that I pay no attention to.
Good for you.
I mean, it doesn't mean that I don't let it get under my skin every once in a while and get really, really frustrated and angry when somebody posts something about me personally or about a project that I've done with zero knowledge of the complexity of the project, right? Like they don't know that the client gave me 5 days to do the work, or the client was retired living on fixed income and so they couldn't afford to do all of the work or any of that. They just know what they see on a YouTube video or an Instagram post. And as we all know, right? Say it with me. The internet is not reality. It is a curated slice of what somebody wants you to believe is reality. And that was the lesson for today.
Jeremy asks, what's your favorite style of art? Or do you have a favorite art museum?
From a conservation perspective, or well, I'll just answer both. From a conservation perspective, I really love portraiture, and because I love retouching damaged faces, because it's really rewarding. It's also the clients just absolutely love it, and so it's rewarding in that respect. But from a personal perspective, I fell in love with pop art and abstract expressionism, post-war American art, in a way that changed how I understood art making. But on the flip side, I really, really love Gilded Age painting. Cecilia Beau, Ralph Clarkson, John Singer Sargent, this super seductive, super romantic, really gorgeous, indulgent portraiture of the 1% and their, their clothing. There's just a mastery of emotion and light and color that can't be found anywhere else. The thing I'm least interested in is landscape. I just it doesn't hit me in the same way that other stuff does, but it's okay.
Karsten has a painting that's been painted on both sides of the canvas. Recommendations?
For what?
Well, it says normally you remove it from the structure and flatten it on a hot table.
I would, yeah, maybe.
On both sides painting?
Yes, it can be done. If you are careful and delicate, you can do a treatment on the hot table that addresses both sides. It's much, much more complicated. If I ever get another double-sided painting in that needs more than just a little bit of minor work, I'll do a video on it. But yeah, I mean, it mostly just depends on how it's going to be displayed, what the owner wants out of it. Do they want both sides conserved, or they just want one? Are we doing a double-sided frame? It's just a unique problem, but there are plenty of solutions there. So I don't know if I answered your question. If it's about an actual project that you have, you're free to email me and we can have a larger discussion about it, and not bore everybody else with the nuances. So yeah.
Christy Wins is curious if you know what got your dad into art conservation.
Hunger. So my father was a painter and a printmaker in Switzerland, and he was having some success, and he went to study with a very famous printmaker named Stanley William Hayter. If you know printmaking, you'll know Hayter's Atelier 17 was legendary. And at that atelier, he met a young woman, my mother, who was also studying printmaking with Stanley William Hayter. Side note, there's a really cool book coming out about the women at the women of Atelier 17. And my mom was going to be in it. If you have any interest in printmaking or that era, you should check it out. I don't know when it's going to come out, but keep your eyes peeled for it. I'll post about it when it comes out. Hi, Mom. Also, if you're not watching, Mom, why? So they met, they fell in love, and they were going to live on my father's farm in Switzerland and be bohemian artists. This is in the 70s, I think. And they came back to the States to get married. And then I came along. And, two artists trying to raise a kid. I think my father recognized that being a working artist, while really important, might not be sustainable. So he started doing conservation. Now, he had been doing conservation in Switzerland for a decade or so before he came to America. I think the way he started so that was how he started the business. How he started in conservation, he was working as a teenager with a house painter, and they got a job to paint a church, the outside of a church. And while painting the outside of the church, which was undergoing renovations, a conservator was doing work inside on the paintings. And my father was curious. He popped his head in and started talking to the conservator. And the conservator recognized that my father had some skill and said, "Hey, do you want to help me on this?" And my dad said, "Yes, please." And the conservator said, "Actually, you're really, really good. Do you want to be my apprentice?" And my father said, "Yes, please." And so he learned conservation and worked with this conservator, and the rest is history, as they say.
Have you ever conserved a piece of art outside of your studio?
Oh, like on site? Yes, I've done work for the FBI in Chicago. They had a really big mural in their entryway that was damaged, and I had to go there multiple times to do some conservation, which was really a trip for me. I mean, having to go through FBI screenings over and over again, and then getting to the point where they just saw me coming and they're like, "Hey, Jillian, yeah, no problem. You can bring all of your solvents and sharp tools into the FBI. Cool, no sweat." That was kind of cool. Generally, I don't do much on-site work because I can't bring my materials into people's homes. The solvents I use generally are not okay for home exposure. I can't bring my hot table. So I try to do all the work in the studio. Occasionally I'll have to go on site to do something small, but I really don't prefer it. And I just don't think that it gives me the best opportunity or avenue for success.
What's the longest time period you've ever worked on one piece, start to finish?
We have a piece here that we've been working on for 9 months, which I'm so fed up with and so sick of that I'm so ready to have it go. It's a huge, it's omnipresent in the next like 10 videos because it's gigantic and it's been here forever. It just took a long time and was just really slow. We worked on another piece for about a year because the amount of retouching that it needed was more than I had ever seen in my life. And I told the client we were just going to work on it once a week or once every 2 weeks because it was too much to take in all at once. And the client was cool with that. And it turned out lovely. And they were overwhelmed and blown away by the results.
Cicely Shuring says that your videos have a classic PBS style and feeling. Is that intentional?
Well, I'm going to take that as the highest compliment that somebody could give me. I am a kid of the 80s, and I spent a lot of time watching PBS, and I found and find the way that PBS tells stories and presents material to be respectful of the material, the people involved, and the audience. They don't dumb things down. They don't sensationalize. They treat everything with respect, and it creates content that's timeless. I hate the word content. It creates programming that's timeless and really fulfilling. And so, yeah, I've always tried to keep that in mind. Like, everybody has their own rubric for the decisions they make. And one of mine is, would this be appropriate on PBS? Would WTTW, which is the local affiliate here in Chicago, would they air this? And if I have any pause, the answer is no. And then I have to change the content.
I don't remember if we asked this, but what triggered you to start your YouTube channel?
No, boy, that's a long question. So it started because I had an Instagram, and the Instagram started because my father had passed away. I was working solo, and while I liked it, it was kind of boring. Mostly in the sense that I had nobody to share the cool things that I was doing with. I just didn't have any colleagues who were immediate that I could get excited about a really cool project or commiserate about a really lousy one, like I did with my father. So I started the Instagram in the vein of why Instagram and social media was first started, to connect with people and share experiences, right? That lofty goal. And it was cool because it did. I connected with other conservators. I connected with a larger audience. And then out of that, the YouTube kind of was born because I found that I couldn't tell the stories effectively on Instagram anymore. This is way back when Instagram was one single image. And then they gave us slideshows of 3 images. But even still, I couldn't effectively tell the stories I wanted to. So I started making the videos because I thought I could, you know, just tell a more full story. And then the rest is history, as they say.
Do you have another DIY project in the works, like building a clampinator?
Another studio project in the works?
Yes.
Well, I'm contemplating tearing the clampinator apart and rebuilding it again, modifying it, because as you know, once you use a tool, you realize the mistakes you've made and you also see the opportunities for making it better. But I'm waiting until I have a real reason to do it. Let me think. I have made some tools that have yet to appear on the channel because I just haven't had the right project to showcase them. I am always tinkering with new tools here. I have a 3D printer, I have a laser cutter. Anytime I can make something that makes my work faster, easier, cheaper for the client, then you bet I am game to experiment. So yeah, I've got a lot of stuff in the works, but for me to put it on the YouTube, I have to have a project that makes it relevant. Otherwise, I'm just making it for the sake of making it and indulging, and I don't know that people want to see that. What do I know? Maybe that's what people do want to see.
Well, some people are curious, what projects do you have in the works that are not studio related?
Oh, not studio related?
Also.
Oh, like personal projects?
Somebody asked about the Porsche specifically.
Oh, yeah. Well, that's an ongoing project that will never end because, I don't know, some things are good when they never end, right? Keeps you with something to do. I have plenty of home projects. I have an old home that needs constant repair and renovation. And so I, occasionally put on my tool belt and cosplay as Tom Silva and renovate a bathroom, that kind of stuff. I just built a desk. I've built I have spent quite a bit of time building furniture for myself and other people because I enjoy that, the woodworking aspect, the engineering aspect. By virtue of the car, I have embarked upon many projects for other Porsche owners, kind of on, not really on commission, but like, hey, friend, can you make this for me or help me make this? And, I do because it's fun, it's entertaining, and I like my friends, and I like to see them have cool things that I've made. But this channel will never be an exploration of my personal hobbies. So I'm like, if ever those things happen to show up on Instagram, it's mostly because I'm just super jazzed about it. But, this is not a Julian lifestyle channel. Not that anybody wants that. And if you do, you should contact a therapist.
How do you prevent or deal with fatigue from working with your hands alone?
So I take a lot of breaks and I switch up what I'm doing. So if I'm sitting for 2 hours, then I spend the next couple hours standing and moving around. If I'm doing a lot of scraping, I make sure to take a lot of breaks so that my hands don't get fatigued. But I've generally found that if you work your hands a lot, they get more and more resistant to that fatigue. And so by virtue of having been working with my hands my entire life, they're pretty robust. But, I think the scraping is the thing that gets me the most. The repetitive nature of it is something that I've had to deal with. And to that end, I have, I've talked about this in videos. I don't remember which one, and I won't challenge you to go back and find it. But when I scrape, I don't move my fingers or my wrist. I usually use my elbow and shoulder as the pivot points. And I find that transferring the pivot or the motion to my shoulder or my elbow, those joints are more able to handle the repetitive action without fatiguing compared to my wrist. And then when they do start getting tired, then I transfer it to my wrist, and then I, kind of share the workload.
Have you ever done work on a portrait that looks like someone you know?
I've ever done I've done portraits of famous people, and portraits that look like famous people. I have done portraits, not anybody that I know personally. That'd be kind of funny. It'd be kind of funky.
I don't know exactly what this question means. I'm hoping you do.
Uh-oh.
Have you done that paint film transfer?
Ooh,
yet?
Yes. Okay, so the paint film transfer, I've been talking about this for, how long have I been making videos? Like 7 years. Paint film transfer is when the paint layer, all of this, has to be removed from the canvas or the wood and then put onto a new substrate. And that happens when the canvas is completely deteriorated or the wood is completely deteriorated, when the substrate is no longer suitable for the artwork, when it's no longer providing adequate support and the future of the paint layer is vulnerable, then you would consider transferring it. And it is, in conservation, it's like heart transplant. It is the absolute last avenue for saving a painting. You never start off by saying, cool, it's got a tear, let's do a paint film transfer. It's wildly inappropriate to take that approach. In my career, which is now 26 or 27 years, I have done it once with my father and twice on my own. And that is probably 300% more than 99% of conservators. It's such a rare occurrence and such a difficult process that I've had conservators who have told me they wouldn't even take the job. They just don't even have the confidence or the experience to do something like that. Not all, I'm sure that others do. So I'm not speaking universally. So other conservators who are watching this who want to get angry at me, I'm not speaking about you. I'm just speaking from my little corner of the world and my experience. I have long maintained that if and when I do get a painting that is a paint film transfer candidate, you will see it. But given the fact that I've done 3 in almost 30 years, don't hold your breath for it. If I get it, we'll do it. Maybe somebody out there watches my videos or knows of a painting that is a paint film transfer candidate. Email me. If it works, let's do it. But it's not something that we see very often.
Chris Gradle wants to know what's the range of cost for a project?
I'm going to be coy and I'm going to say, what's the range for having work done on your car? I know nobody can answer me, so I can have a pregnant pause there. It really depends. There are some projects we do where it's $300 because it's really minor. And then there are some we do that are $38,000 because it is monster work. I would say, actually, I know 100% because I have the data. And I made a post about this in my tariff rant post. I think the average cost of proposals that I have done over the past, I don't know, however long I've been keeping the data, is maybe under $800, just about $800. Now that, of course, means that there's a lot of pieces that are very, very low and a lot of pieces that are very, very high, and they kind of average out. That's statistics. But, I don't know. I can't speak to what other conservators charge, and I won't, but that's what I do. I don't feel like owning art should be something that is solely for the wealthy. I think that that's an offense to art. I mentioned that in the Memorial Day Massacre video, I mentioned that I studied under a very famous Argentinian printmaker named Antonio Fresconi. And it's a great story. I was at New York Print Week when I was in college at the Armory, the print show at the Armory. Every year in the Armory on Broadway. Boy, am I fumbling this. Every year at the Broadway Armory in New York, in Manhattan, there's the International Print Fair, where print dealers from all over the world come and they showcase what they have. And I was in college, and I went and we saw a bunch of my professor Antonio Fresconi's work. And it was selling for a lot of money, lots and lots of zeros, because he was a very famous printmaker. And we came back to school, and I said, "Oh, Mr. Antonio, oh my God!" He was probably in his 80s. We said, "We saw a whole bunch of your work." I said, "Oh, okay, which ones?" I said, "Oh, the Disappeared series." I said, "Oh yeah." I said, "You're never gonna believe how much they're selling these things for. They're so expensive." He said, "What do you mean?" I said, "Oh wow, that print was $50,000 or something." And his face went white. He put his head down, shook it, and he walked away. And he was heartbroken, because for him, that meant that the people for whom he had made the art would never, ever get to see it because it was out of their price range. He made art for the people. And that struck me. That really stuck with me. So to honor his legacy, I like to remind myself that art is for everybody, and that conservation shouldn't put art out of reach for anybody.
All right, up to what percentage of damage or paint loss would you restore a painting?
I will put an Instagram post that will explain that next week in very acute detail. It depends. It depends on what the client wants, needs, expects, demands. It depends on the artwork. It depends where it's going. It all depends. If it's a cherished heirloom and it's horribly damaged, needs a ton of retouching, maybe I'm okay to do it. If it's a gallery and they're going to sell it, maybe there's a different approach. A museum, maybe there's a third approach. So it all depends on what we need out of the project. And by we, I mean the artwork, the artist, even if they're dead, the owner, and the conservator. That's the Venn diagram, right? Success lies in there, balancing the wants and needs of all of those parties.
Do you ever purchase paintings to practice rare or new techniques on?
I have a whole rack in my storage room of organ donors who have been abandoned here by clients or given to me. I mean, sometimes clients will send me paintings and they'll say, "Hey, I was cleaning out my storage room or whatever. I thought that you could use this." The auction house, I told you, they gave me that painting, the one that we sold for charity. So yeah, I have a whole bunch of organ donors that I can use for experimenting on.
Do you edit your own videos?
The ones where the clients aren't involved, where I'm not talking to a client, I shoot and edit all by myself. And you folks can tell because I often leave mistakes in there, like audio glitches or the tripod gets banged or something like that. For the ones where clients are in the studio, I had a videographer come and work with me. I'm actually looking for a new videographer, so if any of you are videographers, filmmakers, and you are interested, email me.
Isn't that fun?
There you go.
Are you surprised that your videos help with anxiety and sleep problems?
Yeah, because they give me so much anxiety, and they're so nerve-wracking. I mean, no, I get it. I get why, I often, when people come in the studio and they say, I'm such a big fan of your work, I've seen all your videos, I joke and I say, "Oh, you stayed awake for all of them." I get it. They're slow, they're methodical, they're relaxing, and they're kind of comforting to, when things are not going great. I don't ever want you all to feel how I feel about them, which is like panic, anxiety, insecurity, nerves, all of that kind of stuff. But yeah, I get it. And I thank you. I thank all of you folks for watching and giving me this opportunity to take my little craft that I do in the studio and, expand it to the whole world. It's a really big privilege, and it wouldn't be possible without support from viewers like you.
We have a musician that wants to know how you choose the music for your videos.
If there's a historical context that I can loop in, if I'm doing I think the Memorial Day Massacre happened in the 30s. I tried to find some kind of ragtime music that would fit. I've done paintings of like post-war America, abstract expressionism, and I use jazz. Otherwise, I think classical music really fits. I try to find something that feels right and that has the right tone, temper, pacing. But there's no magic algorithm. It's just what I think feels good. So I think we'll probably take a couple more questions, and I'm just about wrapping up the retouching. I see a couple spots that I might want to hit again. And then, believe it or not, I'm not done, because Monday, when I come back to the studio, I will take another pass at this and just make sure that I'm completely satisfied after having a couple of days away. Let the colors settle. Sometimes they change as they dry, and sometimes I'll come back and I'll see something that I don't like, and I'll want to have another pass at it. So this is, the almost final pass, but I might come back and change something.
Another question?
Yeah, I'll take another question.
Are there any works that you wouldn't touch with a 10-foot pole, either because the artist or the work itself is controversial?
Ooh, that's a really good question, and one that became omnipresent in the field of art during the beginning of the pandemic and the social protests that were happening in America and all around the world. And it was one that we as conservators really had to struggle with. Would we take a Confederate statue and conserve that? Would we take Nazi propaganda and conserve that? Would we take things that are controversial? And there's no universal answer. I hate to tell you, it really depends. And it's really tough, because what do? As the keeper of cultural heritage, you are not the adjudicator of what is right and what is wrong. That's for society writ large to decide. That's for you folks to decide. And so if you folks out there who make up the zeitgeist, who make up culture and society and the population, decide that this object needs to be preserved, then it's incumbent upon the conservator to respect those wishes and to preserve them. Now, if you bring me let's take a very radical example. If you bring me a KKK a painting celebrating somebody from the KKK, and you tell me you want it preserved so that it can go into a museum and there can be an exhibit about the KKK and its history and its controversial and problematic history in America, then I might say, okay, I can understand why, and I can see how my work will be helpful in educating the population. If you told me we want to conserve this painting so that we can hang it in our ballroom for our KKK meetings, I probably would not take that on. And I would feel very conflicted about contacting the FBI or local law enforcement, because the KKK is a hate group. They're a domestic terror organization. I mean, maybe not now. In the past 5 months, it's changed, but historically, we viewed them as such. And so I would probably be conflicted about taking and preserving that work. And I'd probably have some discussions with some of my colleagues and try to figure out what the right answer is. Luckily, that doesn't happen really all that much, at least not for me. And I hope it doesn't. So let's take like one or two more questions, because I think I'm just about done, and I don't want to overwork the piece. Don't want to, kind of get ahead of myself.
What's the number one thing you wish painters would do to make your life easier?
Not make paintings. First of all, sign your work on the front and the back, right? And then keep a journal of your work. you know, make an Excel spreadsheet, make a journal, just keep a log of what you've made and when. And you really want to be great to the conservator, keep some notes about the materials you use, if they're different or if they're unique or new. I'm not saying that you should have to like give us a cheat sheet, but if you, I worked on Joseph Albert's piece, very famous artist. And on the back, he wrote what colors, what brand, what amount he used to make each piece. And he wrote if he mixed it with Japan dryer or linseed oil. And while that information didn't do the conservation work for me, it meant that I wasn't starting from nothing. I had some information, and it was really helpful going forward because then I knew, oh, okay, well, this is what he used. This is how he used it. That's a vulnerable material. I need to change what I do, or so on and so forth. So that's it. Otherwise, honestly, artists, just make art. Make a lot of it. Make it furiously. Make it good, make it bad, make it sloppy, make it clean. Doesn't matter. We as conservators are here to clean up the mess. Make the mess. That's your job as an artist. All right, so let's take one more. Give me a really good one, and then we'll be done.
Can we do a comment rather than a question?
Sure.
Give her a face tattoo or a mustache.
I was joking before we went on the stream that at the end of it, I was gonna stop and say, okay, I'm all done, and then I was gonna come with a brush and a big black and go and give her a big old mustache. No, unfortunately, I cannot do that. I think the owners of the piece would be pretty upset if Grandma came back.
Great
Grandma came back with a goatee or mutton chops, although it would be interesting and fun. So there you have it. We're about, an hour and a half or so. It took a little longer because I was talking, as I want to do. But there we can see how, in an hour, probably could have done this in about 40 minutes if I was not doing the live stream, how the painting has come together and the damage is gone. And now we can see the image, we can see it free of all the damage. I will come back next week and do some final passes on this piece. And then it needs a little bit of touch up elsewhere, then it will get varnished, and then it will go home to the client. I'll post a picture of it before and after, and maybe a link to the stream for anybody who missed it. But thank you all for joining in. I really appreciate the always insightful and curious, really great questions. You folks are the best audience that somebody like me could ever hope for. Thank you for watching the videos, and I will see you next time. And if you really enjoyed this, petition.org or whatever it's called, leave a bunch of comments, encourage me, build up my ego, tell me I did everything wonderfully and that I'm amazing, and I'll do it again sometime. So enjoy your weekends or good night if you are overseas, and I will see you next time. Take care.